They say that true hell is when the person that you are meets the person you could have been.
Ooh.
The first step is the hardest one. I think that was what I was stuck at for a very long time. You know, I knew that there was something wrong. I didn't know what, and I didn't really know how to fix it. And that's the first step being the most difficult in terms of starting that momentum. You know, you look at, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. All of the people that you admire are just the end result of hundreds of thousands of tiny little interactions and iterations on doing a lot of different things. The way that they show up for their friends, the fact that they turn up on time, all of that stuff, the tiny, tiny, tiny little things. And then that is how you look at somebody that's incredibly impressive. But trying to reverse engineer the impressiveness without thinking that, okay, what is the thing that I can do today, the tiny little action that I can take that will move me slightly closer toward my goal, even if I don't know what the goal is. This quote from Aristotle, he says, if a man knows not where he goes, no wind is favorable. If you haven't considered what it is that you want in life, basically you're just the cleverest rat in the room, right? Your desires are determined by the confused chemical signals of your body and the way you've dealt with past trauma and social norms and paths of least resistance, all of these things. That's what's determining your behavior right now, if you haven't lived a consciously designed life. And the main thing that I've learned is that, look, life doesn't have to be lived by default. You can design it. You can go out of your way to assess, okay, what's underneath this stone? Oh, fucking hell, that's really ugly. I would rather not look at that. And then you give it a bit of a clean, right? You sort of clean it away and you go, okay, right, let's have a go again. For every 20 stones that you turn over to have a look and do some introspective work, 19 of them are disgusting and have something terrifying that sits underneath.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them's good. And you go, actually, do you know what it is? My curiosity, I really like that. Or my empathy, I really like that.
Right.
Most of them are desires that other people have given to you. They're things that you don't actually want to do for yourself. And that's why it's scary work. It's scary work to admit that you're wrong. It's scary work to look at assessing why I do the things that I do. Unchosen suffering is going to happen in life. Your parents are going to pass away, loved ones are going to die, your relationships are going to break down, your body is going to fail you, you're going to become ill or sick or destitute. Things are going to happen that you have no control over. And the only way that you can prepare yourself for unchosen suffering is with chosen suffering. You can elect to put yourself into a position to become a stronger alloy of whatever the metal is that you're made of. And by purposefully choosing difficult things, you will armor yourself against that situation. It's still going to suck, but think about how much more fragile you would be if you hadn't overcome all of this stuff. Every single person that I know that is incredibly successful in a balanced way and has a good perspective on it, elects to do very hard things regularly. It humbles them, it reminds them that they're just mortal. The fundamental problems that everybody faces are the same as they've always been. One of my favorite things from Marcus Aurelius is, the whole universe is change, and life itself is but what we deem it. Life itself is but what we deem it. The 8 most profound words in all of philosophy. What he means is that things are going to happen. You are going to have experiences in life. Almost all of the important impacts of how those experiences change you are going to be the story that you tell yourself about what that experience means. The story that you tell yourself, in some regard, very much is what's happening.
Right.
You know, the framing that you place around the present moment largely determines your experience of it. And this is where having faith in yourself, having confidence in yourself, you know, an undeniable stack of proof that you can deal with whatever is put in front of you is super important. Perfectionism is procrastination masquerading as quality control. So they decide, I'm not going to do a thing until I know exactly the direction that I'm going to go in. And that means that no step is useful until I know the end goal that I'm going to get to. But what they don't understand is that any commitment that you make is a step in the right direction. Anything that you decide that you're going to commit yourself to, Peterson's got one of these rules where he says, commit yourself to one thing as hard as you can and see what happens, right? Like, just write a blog post once a day for 2 months, see what happens. Even if you suck at it and you hate it and it doesn't end up getting any traction and it gives you no sense of joy or whatever, what you've learned there is that you can do a thing every single day for 2 months. That is a really fucking valuable lesson. And the more that you can lean into just committing to doing stuff, far more people than realize it just need to commit to doing a thing. Just do a thing. That's it. Anything. It doesn't matter. Especially if you don't know what to do, because anything is better than no thing. But one of the problems you've got is that people can be anything that they want, but they can't be everything that they want. You have to pick a small, narrow window of stuff that you're going to compete on, right? You can't be the leanest person in the gym whilst starting a new business, whilst going out every single night and socializing, trying to find your partner, whilst starting a podcast and a blog and a bunch of other things. It's like, no. It can be anything you want. Can't be everything that you want. You have to pick what is the highest point of contribution that I can go to. And then over time, you gradually refine those down.
A lot of the time, people need an excuse to perform. They need a race to be working toward, a goal, a holiday, a photo shoot, a wedding, and that is what drives them forward. And that's not nothing. That's an incredibly powerful, potent motivator.
Yeah.
If you can manage to perform without that, that's real power, because it means that not only are you going to choose your suffering, but you're going to continue to hit close to your maximum performance with no finish line, no crowd celebrating your completion, no glory, no nothing.
The momentum that you can build up when things are consistent, sustainable, replicable, the difference is so profound that I can't put words on it. And that's what you see, that's that 1%. Each conversation, each day, each little time that you do something, each interaction, the fact that you turn up early, the fact that you tell the truth as opposed to telling a lie. Every single one of those, a mountain built on layers of paint. Every single time, man. And that's how it felt to me, making a pivot, committing myself to doing something that I really cared about, committing myself to saying that I was wrong when I'm wrong, committing myself to telling the truth even though it's inconvenient. All of those little interactions. And it's that first step, I think, that a lot of people get stuck on. I just want that momentum to begin. I want to push myself down that hill. Think about the things that a lot of people do to make themselves feel better. Actively going out of your way to sit in a hot, circular wooden chasm, right? Or going and putting yourself in 39-degree water. Like, what are you doing? Because the world has become so comfortable, we're having to go out of our way to actively seek discomfort. We inject it into our lives. We artificially inseminate it into our lives. But another thing to consider is the fact that if people are succeeding, even slightly, in a job that they hate, think about how good you could be if it was something that you really, really cared about. Think about how amazing you could be if you pursued something that you genuinely had existential simpatico with, as opposed to something that you detest, or are just not that fussed about. If you're in the chasm of comfortable complacency, just how good could you be if this was something that you loved? Holy fuck. I can feel very comfortable in myself, chasing something that I want to do, my intellectual curiosity, finding people that I resonate with, having conversations that I really care about how to engineer human DNA so that it can survive space flight because there's tons of radiation. Never going to use it, right? Probably not going to get to go to space, probably not going to re-engineer my DNA. Fucking fascinating. I want to know about that. And every single time that I leaned into something that I wanted to do a little bit more, it reminded me of the direction that I was going in, and that was the drink that I was thirsty for. You are this very unique combination of genetics and experience and past traumas and social norms and your funny lisp and the fact that one foot's slightly bigger than the other. All of that combined together gives you the opportunity to have a very unique offering to the world. And it is incredibly difficult to compete with someone who's being themselves. How am I going to be a better Joe Rogan than Joe Rogan is? The best that I can hope for is being the second best Joe Rogan in the world, if I decide to do that. So if you decide to lean into the thing that only you can do, that is where your competitive advantage lies. And that doesn't mean that you can't progress forward. That doesn't mean that you can't enhance yourself and develop new skills. But I do think that there's something to do with embracing the uniqueness that you have that will allow you to direct yourself towards something that is more fulfilling, that's more in line with you, that is competitively more effective. Socially, people are going to resonate with you. We don't love people for how much they're like other people, right? No one's ever fallen in love with someone and said, you know what it is? I just love the fact that I can accurately predict all of their opinions without having heard their thought on something beforehand. I just adore how predictable she is. No, it's because of how unique they are. For a long time, I judged the value of my work based on how other people interpreted it. So I'd outsourced my sense of self-worth to everybody else. I was playing a role, right? And I didn't feel love, I only ever felt praise. One of the reasons for that is because the thing that I was doing was just me playing a role. Like, I wasn't being Chris Hemsworth, I was being Thor. I wasn't being Gladiator, right? I was being Russell Crowe. And it took a long time for me to deprogram all of that. It took me a very, very long time. And from the outside, you go, well, it's a guy that's got the club stuff and is doing modeling and reality TV and things like that. And from my side, it was so vapid and hollow, and there was nothing there for me. There was nothing there that I wanted at the end of that really, really mattered. And then I started the podcast Modern Wisdom like 4.5 years ago because I wanted to speak to people that might have the answers. If I'm getting this from listening to other people's conversations, maybe if I get to sit down with other people that I think are interesting or useful or have insights, perhaps that'll move move me a little bit closer to where I'm supposed to be. And over time, 4.5 years and more than 500 conversations or whatever, every single time there's just like a little 1% that just moves you, a little 1%. Here's an insight, here's an insight, here's an insight. Here's something that comes up during a conversation. I always wanted to interrupt. If I didn't speak on a show, if there was silence ever, I would presume that it's because I wasn't interesting, or the guest wasn't interested in me, or maybe the audience would think that I was stupid or whatever. Always outsourcing my sense of self-worth to what other people were thinking about me. And that was a byproduct of how I'd lived most of my 20s. And it took a long time for me to deprogram that, to think, okay, find somewhere firmer for you to stand. If I've done everything that I'm supposed to do in terms of social norms, from a working class guy, the northeast of the UK, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go out and do all this stuff. And that still didn't satisfy. Okay, like there's something wrong with that. So I started consuming stuff like, this is a great time, 2016, 17. This is the advent of Jordan Peterson, conversations with people like Sam Harris, Alain de Botton from the School of Life, massive influences. Because for the first time, I was being told as a young guy that there are different things that you can value. Stuff like truth, right? Virtue, integrity, honesty, doing something that's hard and worthwhile, not just doing something for its effect. It felt like there needed to be something more. And I went on reality TV, a blue tick on Twitter, and free charcoal toothpaste, and all of that stuff, right? Like I did the full thing. And then came off and thought, is this really all that I've got to offer the world? And the problem was that I'd taken the rules of what life is supposed to be, of how you're supposed to enjoy yourself, of what is supposed to be valued, that it's supposed to be weekend warrior, it's all about the girls that you're sleeping with, or the money that you're earning, or how many people know you. And it turned out like I'd reached the top of that tree. I'd completed that game, right? And it wasn't fulfilling to me. It hadn't answered any of the questions that I had deep down. It really, really hadn't. So I started asking different questions. Thinking about the role model, a lot of the time, or at least where I grew up in the northeast of the UK, there's not a massive amount. There weren't many people that were like the people that I wanted to be. And I realized that I didn't have any role models, or many that were fantastic for me to be around. But having a negative role model, so someone that you know that you definitely don't want to be like, I actually think is maybe just as useful. If you don't have anybody around you that you want to be like, and you do have people around you that you're like, I don't want to have his relationship with his father, his type of way that he shows up for his kids, the financial setup that this person's got in their life, that person's body image, that person's relationship with their diet, all of that stuff. Those are all flags that you can plant in the ground. They're going to say, okay, I'm not going to be this, I'm not going to be this, I'm not going to be this. And avoiding ruin is probably more useful than actually trying to achieve success. Like, people can get themselves out of the game a lot more easily than they can get to the top. And if you end up with a criminal record, or dying in a car crash because you were drunk driving, or getting a girl pregnant when you were both too young to support the baby, like, all of these things are huge problems. And the downside of that is much worse than the upside of being more inspired. So I just felt like looking at negative role models is potentially a useful way to go about things like that. When you think about how locked in to people's lives they are, and concerns about making changes, there are opportunities, and there are people that reach out that have made huge changes in their lives. I'm sure you've seen them as well. Way, way, way into late life. There is no trench that's been dug so deep that you can't get yourself out of it. But it is easier the earlier that you do it. That's just a sad fact, that if you're able to nip something in the bud before it becomes too entrenched, before you have too many responsibilities that make it harder because you've got to keep on grinding in order at the shitty job that you don't like, while you've got to side hustle, while you've got to raise the kids, while you've got to pay the mortgage, while you've got to do all of the rest of the things in the adulting, it would be easier. But it's never going to be too late. Admitting that you're wrong, as far as I can see, is one of the best signals that somebody could put across. Because you go, oh, this person isn't preoccupied with the ideology or with committing to previous opinions that they've already had. Right. What they are concerned with is the truth.
Yes.
Updating the operating system. Importance of how people attach themselves to their opinions. So the fact that a big bunch of people on the internet and in the real world feel terrified to admit that they're wrong. If we are judged by our opinions, not our deeds, then admitting the fact that you have a wrong opinion is tantamount to destruction, right? It's destruction of the ego. People that can't admit that they're wrong are at the biggest competitive disadvantage in the modern world of anybody else, as far as I can see. You need to be able to admit that you're wrong. One of the problems of playing a persona, which I was doing for a very long time, this big name on campus guy in front of a club, like, hi mate, bye mate, how are you mate, blah, 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 was that the persona was contrived. I was always thinking about, who is it that I'm supposed to be? What would Joe want me to say right now for me to get the response from Joe that I actually wanted? Right. And what that means is, when someone asked me my opinion, I didn't actually have a truth. I had a sequence of roles, like a bunch of different algorithms or scripts that I'd run, like a chatbot. And I would be like, okay, if this, then all of the people I've spoken to that are kind of similar to Joe, therefore I will come out with this answer, and maybe that'll have the response that I want. But I struggled to admit that I was wrong, because that would be admitting that all of the models that I'd created were ineffective somehow. Whereas the version where you're much more humble and you realize, look, I'm a flawed, terrible creature that is constantly still trying to get things right, and I am open to, in fact, I'm seeking being wrong as much as possible. The more that I can be wrong, the more that I'm going to identify all of the different pitfalls that are going to go across. That's what you need to be looking for. And if you can't admit that you're wrong, if you can't get used to the discomfort of holding an opinion, feeling someone push up against it, feeling, you notice it arise inside of yourself, right? You go, oh shit, that sounds compelling. That sounds like I might have had a blind spot here. And if you're not able to accept that to come through, you are at a huge disadvantage.